Hello and welcome back. This is the Kylie Stone, the Uncharted Leader, your coach in causing a new paradigm of leadership. And today it really is an honor to speak with Adam Nebbs, is a gentleman who has a podcast called Settling is Not an Option. I met Adam on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn over COVID has certainly put a lot of people in touch with each other, which has been extraordinary. But I too had the privilege of joining Adam on his podcast recently, and we were talking about, the power of stories and amongst many other things, mental health and the importance of mental health in the workplace. And of course, whilst appearing on his show, I was like, oh my goodness, the work you're doing and what you're up to and your story in particular, Adam, is really extraordinary. And I'm moved by the topic of settling is not an option. I think that number one, that's really great. But also, you've had a very interesting change from working in an industry and then exiting that industry and going deep into research, and you're very passionate about mental health in the workplace. So where I'd like to start, Adam, is really just sharing and kind of identifying, what you're passionate about and specifically what it is that you're now doing. Can we start there?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks so much for that introduction and inviting me on the show. Yeah, so I'm now working as a researcher. So I started in August. So I'm working at the Menzies Institute for Medical Research down in Tasmania. And the area I'm focused on is workplace mental health, and specifically like how does a business or organization measure workplace mental health? Because it's very complicated. It's one of those kind of wicked problems in society. And the more I dig into it, the more I realize how complicated it is. Because I think going into the problem, I thought, why aren't workplaces just fixing this? Like what, like it was very much in my mind, this idea of just these big corporate bodies, just choosing not to manage this problem because they don't care about people. And although there'll be a cohort of people in society that, do put profits over people, I think it's also because it's incredibly complicated, and academia has not really helped create practical applications, so it's very difficult. So what I'm doing at the moment is writing my first paper on demonstrating what tools are out there that are practical, that are free, that, any person can pick up in an organization and utilize to understand, have we got a mentally healthy workplace? Where do we begin? What are our options? So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at the moment. Bit of a change from what I did before.
Good, and I might swing back to have you share with us where that passion started. But before we do that, I am also interested in the connection to your passion and a podcast that you have called Settling is Not an Option. What does that exactly mean for you?
So that basically came about because, again, so my podcast partner, Amanda Stanhope, who's in Michigan, her and I connected just after I exited my last job in finance. And I just looked at her profile and I was like, wow, okay, so she's been through this process of exiting a job with no real idea what to do next. And she's got through it okay. So I just need some advice from her. And she was just very open to sharing all of the stuff on the expectation gaps. She'd love me to do a plug for her website because it's an amazing resource. But yeah, that basically off of the back of that, we started talking heaps, and she was like my coach in a way of just saying, like, here's what you're going to encounter. Here's some suggestions on how to keep yourself in a good headspace throughout this really difficult time of uncertainty. And then one day I was like, I really want to do a podcast, because her and I would just have these chats over Zoom, and we'd just spend an hour or 2 hours just having big, lengthy philosophical chats. And I loved it. It was so fun. And then I just said, do you want to do a podcast? And she was like, wow, I never thought I would do that, but yes, let's give it a go. And now it's been 8 months, and we've got, we've got some wonderful content on our channel now. Like, I'm really quite proud of what we've made. But I think what we've done throughout is we've really tried to interview some really interesting guests who are going to challenge the status quo of how to live and how not to settle in your life, but also just talked about all these different things, stoicism or Carl Jung's philosophy, or just these different things, because ultimately we realize that everyone's different. Everyone's going to have their own entry point into choosing not to settle for maybe what they're doing now, which is not causing them a lot of enjoyment. So we're really just trying to throw all this content out there and say, hopefully something sticks and resonates with you. And like us, you go, actually, I don't want to work in this job anymore. I don't have to. Society tells me I have to work in this job, or I have to be in this relationship, or whatever it may be. But really, I don't. Like, I can choose my new path, which is what me and Amanda did. And yeah, we're hopefully creating more non-settlers, I guess.
Yeah, it is really an extraordinary topic, and I do think it's one that's also very challenging, Adam. You know, I think just for a moment, as you were sharing about that, I was reminded of a couple of things. Firstly, I can see why I'm so in love with the podcast itself, because for me, settling was not an option in my career when I made the transition out of media. But also in reflecting on when that happened for me, it did come at a time when the media industry in itself was under a significant disruption, with print media just being wiped out. And we had it was almost like the COVID of the media industry was happening back then, right? Back in 2000, and it was 2014 at the peak. But the reason I say that, Adam, is because at that very same time where I was forging for a new future, not only for myself, but for other women who were at work dealing with juggling children in a senior leadership role, a very close friend of mine and a long-term colleague had committed suicide. And so I just, this question of settling not being an option seems to not just apply when we're considering whether we stay in a job or not, but when we take a good look at what's actually happening under the surface for people, that stuff that we mostly don't see, all the stuff that we get stressed about. And I'm just reminded on many occasions, Adam, about how we can't settle because there's just too much at stake. Like we can't, it's like life's too precious.
Yeah. Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, because I've encountered that myself. My best friend died by suicide a number of years ago, and I'm still not okay. Like, it still really rattles me a lot. And that probably also feeds into, as you say, the not settling pieces. It's like and this is something you said on our podcast as well. It's like the faces that we put on, because we feel this obligation to society to kind of put the face on and be like, yeah, everything's fine. Because so often society's like, no, you can't talk about how you're not in a good place, because that's not okay. Like, we want you to constantly be in a good place so we can keep the status quo going. But like, it is very liberating when those masks come off and you get to see people for who they really are. And I think when people are seen for who they really are, it's very cathartic, and it helps people navigate all these difficult issues. Because I think so often we all feel very alone, which is just crazy, really, because we're all going through so many things every day, and COVID should really put like an emphasis on that. But I just feel like that's a big thing, a societal problem, is we're all still so obsessed with how others will perceive us. I must put a mask on. I can't take my mask off. But I am seeing more and more people now choosing to be very open and honest about their feelings and emotions and struggles, which is why I really liked your story, that you basically were like in the coffee shop. I love that story of, actually, how are you going? I'm not going well. I'm not happy. I'm frustrated about this. And what did it do? That authenticity spurred more authenticity in other people. And then you created a movement, so that's what we can do if we chuck the mask away.
Well, yeah, let me flip back then and say, my deepest condolences for you having lost a friend of yours. Do you mind if we talk briefly about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
And in talking about that, how about I create a context and say this is in service and in honor of this relationship, and in service of this person that it was in your life. How long ago was that, and what was it something that became a linchpin for you?
Yeah, so that was about 4 years ago, and it certainly, I think it has. It's really been a kind of silent driver behind why workplace mental health is so important to me, because I hate the thought of how much my friend was struggling. And I loved him. I still look at our messenger chats occasionally, and I had from him nothing but love. He was just one of those souls that just had nothing but love. And there'd be so many people out there, who love so fiercely, but are deeply, deeply struggling inside and just feeling not feeling heard.
Mm,
And he struggled with major depression for a long time. He was on many different medications and kind of staring down the barrel of like electroshock therapy and all these horrible things that he was
mm,
terrified about, which I think any sane person would be absolutely terrified by. But yeah, he's the person that stands with me every day. I think we keep these people alive by not forgetting them, by holding them with us every day. And I feel he is standing with me every time. And um, but yeah, I just hate this idea of anyone struggling, and the workplace can be such an important platform to really help shine the light on these things and help these people through. So yeah, it's not easy for me. I still feel quite emotional even talking about it now. I feel like I've hopefully to some degree put it to bed. I've spent a lot of time with his parents talking and sharing stories about how amazing he was, but he is the silent driver behind this, I think, for me.
mm. And was your transition, your decision to leave work in any way a settling, not an option? And was that timing? Was it around the same time? Did it play a
No,
role?
it was after it. I mean, that was probably my first encounter of, going through something huge like that, going to my boss at the time or my support network around me at work, and just people having absolutely no idea how to respond. And
Mm,
that's not their fault. At the time, I was very frustrated that, here I was saying like, "Hey, I've just lost my best mate," and people were just stunned.
mm,
Didn't know how to respond. I could see their uncomfortability because of this worry, like, oh, am I going to say the wrong thing and set him off, and then he won't be here for the next week? Like, so I get it, but then at the same time, I'm thinking that was my first kind of foray into why the hell is this an issue? Like, why can't people talk about this? It's
mm,
because it's a taboo subject.
mm.
People worry they're going to say the wrong thing, and you know, I just think we need to just break that down. I just think it's bullshit that we're in 2021 with all these technological advancements, and yet we can't even talk to each other.
Mm.
How does that work? Like, that's what frustrated me. So it's just been a number of things after that, to be really honest. Unsupportive workplaces, uh, just workplace bullying, workplace politics. That was the last straw for me, basically, in the previous job I had, and it was a case where I sat down and I thought, no, I don't want to. I don't want to come to work every day dreading my job and just sticking out because of the money. Like, no, I'm gonna quit, and it's absolutely terrifying. And what me and Amanda always talk about in the podcast is we had the luxury of being able to quit because we had a bit of money behind us to be able to spend some time looking. For others, unfortunately, that people won't be in that position. So I'm not saying just chuck your job away, but it's more a mindset of making that first decision to say, no, I don't deserve to be in this place. I need to figure out, well, what's my plan of attack going to be? What do I need to do? And what do I want to do? Like, what am I passionate and excited about? So, yeah, so it's been quite a long journey, I think, but probably that was the start. I think that was the spark that kind of made me go, I'm so confused as to how this is an issue and how we cannot talk about it. So,
Mm, mm.
yeah.
So just I'm curious about your experience in making that transition of uh, from not settling, uh, and especially like you say, many people are not in a situation where financially they can, it occurs to them like, well, that's all good for you to say because you've got X, or because you've got, money, or because you've got a husband, or because,
Mm,
there's always a because, right?
mm.
So if we were to take the because out of the kind of context, what is there that you certainly have seen or discovered, or is some of the things that help people to really do the work, and I suppose do the work before they leave or out, but actually, because if you don't ever take action, right, nothing is ever going to change, right? So based on your experience and what you discovered for yourself, were there some key lessons for you that, helped you to make that decision that would be valuable for other people?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the first thing is introspection. Like, you need to sit down with yourself, and a lot of people, I think, struggle to sit down with themselves because it's probably the hardest thing you could ever do in your life, I think. um,
Can I just stop there on that
sure.
point? Sorry, I've heard that said a lot, right? And I noticed that I'm agreeing with you. Yes,
Yeah.
and that experience when we stop drinking alcohol, we take sugar out of our diet, or we confront the issue, and so as a result, we have to confront the thing. So I just want to ask you for your opinion about that, because I think scientifically, I do think you know more about this, and I'm curious about your experience per se. Why? Because on one hand, I go, what? We've been with ourselves for 40 years. What the heck is so hard about being with ourselves? What is that?
Yeah, I do think that's really funny. Well, I've got quite a few friends around me that are in the same, I don't know, kind of have gone through the same journey that I have. Like, they are intensely in contact with their emotions and their thoughts, constantly analyzing everything. And so for me, in as much as I say introspection's hard, it wasn't hard for me because I do it every day. Like, it's a symptom almost of the anxiety I experience. So on the one hand, here I am saying, do I like my social anxiety and constant fears of the world? No. But it gives me this superpower that I can sit down with myself and go, well, that's what I've been doing every day. There's no difficulty there. But I do think that people are terrified at what they find, like to be silent, because then they might have to confront some things. And as soon as something pops into your head and you realize that you have to take action, I think it creates a responsibility. It's this idea of, well, actually, I'm really unhappy in my job. Oh, what do I have to do now? What I probably need to figure out what I want to do with my life. And that's terrifying for some people. It's easier to go, oh, we're not going near that thing, because then I'd rather, struggle through this job and tell everyone around me how much I hate it, and stand out the front having ciggies all day long complaining about my job. I'd rather do that than sit down and realize I actually hate this job and I now have to take action, because all of a sudden you're into the unknown. I think it comes down to this known of, I hate this job, but I know every intricate detail about the job, whereas I don't know what's going on out there. There could be all sorts of scary things, which, ultimately it's this big fear mentality. So that's what I think it is. People are terrified.
That's really fascinating. I think the thing that I'm fascinated by, and also can see a direct correlation to, is the world of certainty, right? Yes. How wedded we are to certainty, how wedded we are to control and knowing. But the thing that just stood out for me with what you just said, Adam, was the specific part about knowing. And are we, doing that, which you say, standing out, having ciggies, pretending it's all really great, miserable and complaining, when the truth of the matter is we're just absolutely scared of confronting that question, or confronting that I don't know. I confront, like, what would it take to confront? I don't know. That's just mind-boggling to me. And the other thing I heard you say, it was kind of I'm not sure if it was really there, but something, and correct me if I kind of misheard it, but
sure.
Are we, you said something like, are we afraid of finding out something about ourselves? And when you said that, it really sparked something for me, and I'm curious about what it might be for you, because if there was if there was something really good to discover, would there be anything to be afraid of? Right? So yeah. If there was something really great, like if I was going to discover I'm Wonder Woman, I mean, I would really not be afraid of that, right? But I say that because I noticed for myself when doing this, and I'd just, of course, when I was going through it for myself, I wasn't having a conversation called, oh, I wonder what I'm really afraid of discovering. No, I was in the thick of this, my life falling apart. And the thing that I was petrified of was that I was so fucked up. Yeah. But I was afraid that I was just such a fucked up mess that everything that I was going to do was just going to fall apart. Yeah. And I was also afraid that I really was a bad person. Like, oh my God, what if I really am a bad person and I'm just inevitably always going to be a failure? Like this view, I think, this kind of mask that we were talking about before about, we in life spend 40 years of our life going, I'm a good person, but I'm a good person, I'm a good person. And then inevitably, when you have a crisis, what we're really confronting is all those times we're a freaking asshole.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, I was a bit nasty about that. Oh, my internal judgment, like, is this fear? So, was there something that stood out for you? Like, I'm going to put you on the spotlight here. This is going to challenge you to be vulnerable. So my apologies.
Hey, look, that's the subtext of what we're talking about, so I have to do it.
Okay, fabulous. So for you, was there a particular thing that you were mostly afraid of?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting what you say. You are afraid of what you're going to find, and for me, I think it is accepting that there's some bad parts of your personality that maybe you don't like and you are trying to constantly hide from. Mine was, and it's still there. Me and Amanda always have a laugh about it because anytime I say something on the podcast, she'll be like, "Is that your ego coming out?" It's like this for me. It's like, what personified my career at the bank was this obsession with ego and everyone telling me how great I was, and it just completely shaped who I was. And all of my interactions became very, very disingenuine and all about like, how can I maximize me, and it wasn't about other people. And it's so funny at the time, I thought I'm very good at convincing people that, like I am this authentic person. People can read through it. They can easily read through it. Doesn't matter how good you are at the PR stuff. People know when you're authentic or not. And that was the big thing, I think, is realizing that there was that part of me that still to this day is bubbling below the surface. You're never going to get rid of your ego, but it can drive your behaviors. And
so let's if I can just let go of the word of ego for a second.
sure.
What parts, so when you look at the parts of the personality that you would bucket into the ego that you don't like to confront, how else would you describe those parts of your personality? What are some of the attributes or things or behaviors? So I think one you said was this, how you showed up at work.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think it's like this, you coming first, so it's almost like the antithesis of leadership, where a proper leader is meant to lead from the front and do all that heavy lifting and then just make a nice pathway through for the others. Instead, it's basically where it's kind of all those pictures in cartoons you'd see where the leader's at the front, yelling and being like, do that. That for me, because I was a leader at the time who was very much all about ego at the start of that leadership journey, was that person who was all at the front being like, you guys are an instrument, like, and this is, I think there'd be so many leaders out there, and this is something I've confronted, so I'm happy to say it. It's where you look at your people and you're like, you are an instrument to raise me up on high. And any leader out there who is saying, no, I've never thought that. I've never felt that way.
Oh, come on. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. It is such bullshit. I mean, you and I can say this, right, Adam, because I think this conversation ultimately, given when you've done the work, it's easier to say it, right?
It is.
But I think it's not as if we're doing it as if to say it's something personal about who we are. Actually, it is the design of a human being. And I think,
yes.
And look, and one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the Indigenous culture and embedding that is because they're the complete opposite. In fact, there's much to be learned from Westerners and their default as a human being to be all about self, right?
Yes.
Because we only need to look at the way children are, and hello, there's not a single human being that doesn't go through some period of one life where it's all about them. So at some point in our life, we are all going to go through that. It's all about me, right? And it's only in the Indigenous culture that they're raised in an environment where they're raised to always put community first. It's not to
Yep.
say they're not a human being and therefore they don't trigger that, but they're raised in an environment that is all about taking care of community. So, you know, I'm right there with you. I think this is a great call out. I love the call out, and thank you for being vulnerable and authentic about that, because I do think it is the one thing, Adam, that I truly do believe is required about great leadership. I really do think it takes a leader to be authentic, to say, oh yes, it really is all about, you know, I would be lying if I said it wasn't about me, because I wouldn't want to have been a leader if it wasn't about me. Okay, great. Now we got that. Excellent. Now put that to the side and go, okay, great. Now what for others, you know?
Yeah. Well, something that I heard a while ago from Simon Sinek, because he is just the, I don't know, the guru of leadership. But
you
there's something that he said.
You got a love for Simon Sinek. I have a girlfriend who keeps raving about being
absolutely.
a fan. Yeah.
You know, anytime I need a refresher in leadership, I'll listen to his talks and be like,
yeah, great.
But there's something that he says, and I think this is what people need to realize. You know, I'm so hesitant to call anyone a leader or call myself a leader, right? So I'd say at the start of my journey, probably up until it wasn't until the end that I could call myself a leader. And that's even being a stretch, because I think there was still a lot of work to do. But he talks about the responsibility and the risk and the sacrifice of being a leader, right? So many people are, you know, will say, I've got the leadership title. And it's like, no, to be a real leader is absolutely exhausting. Is you know, it's literally working every day and nobody's saying thank you to you, but you're not doing it for the thanks. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You know, it is incredibly difficult. So I'd say there's not a lot of leaders out there. You know, there's some wonderful, I'm sure there are some wonderful leaders out in the world, but in the corporate space that I was in, I'm sorry, I don't care what your story is. There was next to no leaders in that finance industry. It was an industry of self-serving people, but people just very good at and even brainwashing themselves into saying, you know, of course I'm a leader, and telling others, you know, this is how to be a leader. But no, they're not acting as leaders, you know.
Yeah, you've hit a real sweet spot for me, Adam. I mean, I'm incredibly, you know, I do think, and again, an advocate on the messaging that Simon Sinek is putting out in the world, and his, you know, shouting praises over, you know, taking the view of the title and that out of the space. And I do think I do have compassion, right, for those who are in those roles where that's been the case, because I do think, unfortunately, and this is where I think we fell into a paradigm of leadership that is out of date, right?
Yes.
And I do, and because I, you know, this is probably the good heart part of me. I fundamentally believe that every human being on the planet is just an extraordinary human being, right? We are all great, right?
Yes.
And then it just happens that something happens in our life that takes us off a different direction, and all of a sudden, without any support or resources, we end up with the life we do, right? So I'm really of the, you know, hence why I'm so like, we've got to deal with this hierarchy, not mostly because what happens in that model is all the behaviors that come with it, you know, the default to control and command, the default to be managing versus leading, the default for people to sit at a particular top and limit the possibility of what's occurring in the front line, like on many levels. And what you're talking about, I do think, I mean, I was a leader, you know, that was my days, right? You know, when I was heading up on the executive leadership team, it's what it was like. We were a hierarchy, and it was control and command. And quite frankly, I look at myself back then and I go, oh my God, you were such an asshole. Like, oh my God. Geez, when it was like being a parent, when you can't get them to do what you do, what do? You yell at them. Oh shit. So goddamn embarrassing. I mean, I'm going to cut myself some slack there. I had a child under 12 months and I was, I think 6 months pregnant. So I blame that one on the hormones.
It'd be so true of so many people. But, you know, like the message there, and this is one I need to constantly keep hearing because it conflicts with the story in my head, which the story in my head is that everyone's out to get me and everyone's, you know, inherently cruel and things like that, which comes from years of my own content influencing it, right? But like, I know, as you say, that everyone everyone deep down is good. There is goodness in there, but it's just all this societal stuff that's programming us to go against that. It's a societal problem,
Mm.
that we are having to fight against every day. So that's why, in as much as with, say, the podcast we're doing, is we're really trying to keep in mind always that it's like some people won't hear it at all. Like, we could have the most convincing speaker, so eloquent, such beautiful messaging, but it's just going over their head because they're not ready to hear it.
Mm.
And it's because they don't have the capacity to hear it. There's so much, as you say, going on in their life. Society is literally manufactured to keep you where you are. They don't want you to self-actualize, wake up and go, actually, I don't need to be in this job, because then the whole of society is going to collapse, So there is a level where there's a vested interest, I think, especially for the bigwigs of society, to keep things moving as it is. But I think people are, underneath all of that, they are inherently good. And it's almost we're trying to every week in the podcast connect to people that are at the right space that we were in. Because if I look back, as Amanda will say about when she was a chartered accountant in the beginning, we couldn't hear it. I wouldn't be having these conversations. I'd be more worried about, what's my bonus going to be at the end of the quarter? Am I going to get the most money I can? Because I couldn't hear it. So I guess it is that compassion piece and understanding to say that it's like, well, you've got to get there on your own. And hopefully, whether it's my content or the other different pieces of content out in the world, you will grab onto that at the right time, and that will help waken you up to what's really important in the world, I think.
Yeah. So I want to flick to what your ideal state is. When we talk a lot about vision. When we have a vision for something being, what is the vision that you have? What is the future you see that you're out to fulfill on?
For myself?
Well, yeah, right. I mean, let's assume that everything that's in your creation, called the podcast, you've got a young child, you are doing a PhD. I mean, you're giving yourself, you are doing the not settling as an option, right? In service of something. I mean, what is the thing that inspires and lights you up to do that every day that you see that you're out to fulfill on?
It's a tricky one. Like I want to, because I'm still grappling it with it every day. I really want to, because I think the things that give me the most enjoyment every day are the really small things. So like throughout my PhD, for example, is when I'm reading things and connecting the dots, and it just makes me so excited and passionate. And that's what gets me out of bed. Like I'm running around the house, annoying the crap out of my partner by telling her, oh my God, I just learned this thing. And she's going, okay, that's awesome, babe. Great to hear it. But for me, I'm so excited. Those are the little things. Or just really enjoying the small moments of going out in nature and having these moments of stillness and realizing things. Like, so for me, it's like, I want to maximize that, because lately I've very much been stuck in that old mentality of consumed by content. Am I going to do well enough in my PhD? Am I going to get recognized? Am I going to be, all these old school things, which I believe I'm above. And that's always something that causes a bit of tension in me, where I'm like, I know better than this, but I'm lapsing back into old behaviors. So for me, it's like, I don't want to forget the lessons that I learned early on. Like, I feel like I'm beginning to settle back into old habits, and I almost feel like a fraud in some ways. Especially lately, with doing a podcast on settling is not an option. Yet I'm like, I'm still got some of those old school behaviors kind of driving me. So I need to realign myself with what I know to be important in the world, and it's not all this bullshit, So yeah.
So if we were to give that a label called not, so when you say it's not something, what is the opposite of what it's not?
That's a good question.
I know, it's right. It's interesting because I heard this comment the other day that 80% of our thoughts are wired to self-defeating thoughts, right? So, we have a default to speak what I don't want, what I want to avoid, the old behaviors and the la la la. And certainly what I also know from the neuroscience, and you probably know more in depth given what you're studying, but that actually as the way the brain works is either to avoid something, or to avoid pain, or to seek pleasure, right? So it's not easy to do that, because the majority of the wiring in the brain is wired to scarcity and negativity, right? So but if we could, so now that we've had this conversation, I'm kind of hoping by speaking a little bit too long there, it might have percolated a few things. But if you were to give any, what are the words that come to mind for you about what the pleasurable outcome would be?
Yeah, I think that's something I got to keep in mind. Like, and I've got to be compassionate to my brain as well, is that it is doing its job, which is there's always threats in the world. Jump to the negative because it'll keep you alive. So firstly, I've got to just realize my brain's doing what it's meant to do. But at the same time, yeah, I think not live my life worrying about what if I lapse back into that old Adam that I didn't like seeing. It being like, well, yeah, it's taking action, I think, taking the right actions, enjoying the podcast for what it is, enjoying the work for what it is, just doing things. I think, yeah, too many thoughts and too many worries and concerns is what's going to probably have almost the opposite effect to what I'm looking for. I've just got to live it, I think. And that's what Joe Dispenza talks about, who's one of those neuroscientists that I love, where he's like, you've just got to do it. Like you can't sit there and, you've just got to kind of do it. And then your brain goes, oh, okay, we're on this path now. And it picks up rather than getting absorbed in the thoughts and the thinking part of it, which is, I think, where I'm at the moment.
Yes, I can really get that. So if we were to say, imagining yourself whilst you're just doing what it is that you're doing in that present state, when you think about that, what is the experience like for you? Like what can you see is the experience, or how it feels for you? Like what's present?
Like, I think at the moments when, like, I just feel high on life almost, I guess. It's like I feel like I almost rise above all the bullshit that I'm so concerned about. Like, it feels like there's almost like a layer above all my concerns. That's how I feel like when I'm really living those important moments. And it's yeah, I think that's it for me. It's kind of rising above all that. The problem is at the moment I'm like overthinking an answer. So this is like a perfect live example of what I do.
Well, it's perfect, right? And the reason I was even asking a few questions about that is because I do think it's incredibly, thank you for even just grappling with that with us, because I do think there's a lot of us that do grapple with that. And I, for one, was very much one of them. I'm in my head a lot. I mean, I'm a researcher, very over analytical in my thinking. And for me to get present to actually the experience that comes with that future was not an easy thing to do. But what I do hear, Adam, is there's a couple of things that I actually hear in your speaking that's come out loud and clear when you talk about what that future looks like. One of the things that I was present to was just this profound appreciation for life. Like I was just really present to appreciation, just real appreciation for everything. Like there's a way that you speak that is appreciative of like all the stuff that you even struggle with, right? But also an appreciation for who you are when you're in those moments of taking action, just like the simple things. And so that's the first thing I really hear. And the other thing I hear that you do say a lot actually is a real sense and experience of compassion. And so anyway, that's just what I heard.
No, that was perfect. You translated that. I don't know how you got that from what I said, but that was the implicit meaning behind all my rambling, because that is it. Like I need to remember every day, like everything I have right now, I am incredibly grateful for. I have an amazing daughter who just blows me away. I've actually got something on my fridge right now. When I was having a rough time for a couple of weeks, I was just not in a good headspace, and my daughter picked up on that because she's been learning about emotional intelligence and the blue zones and the green zones, and she wrote this card, which every time I look at, it overwhelms me with how wise she is. she's written on there, you don't want to be in the blue zone, Dad, sorry. And then a picture of like, you know, me standing there and we're holding hands. And it was just out of the blue. Like, she picked up that Dad wasn't in a good place, and she was very sad to see that. And she wrote that for me. And I just think, wow, what a lucky person I am to have a 5-year-old who's capable of picking that up and you know, and kind of writing that for me, you know. So I try and remember that every day, because what I do have in my life now is wonderful, and everything else is just the insignificant. And it's just trying to remember that, I think, when I'm bogged down with these insignificant things, being like, really, my life is exactly how I want it to be. I don't think there's anything else I need. It's the things that I want, the insignificant things I want. So I've just got to remember that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Well, a couple of things to complete on that, and then I'm going to come back and ask you to complete the statement that we share at the end of the podcast about, which I'll give you a heads up before I then say a few things, right? So the statement is, a leader is someone who, and then I'm going to get you to finish it. So just one thing I want to just say about your daughter, I do want to acknowledge you. And I mean, I know you say it's a gift that you've got a 5-year-old who is that, but she is a function of who you are, right? So she shows up in your listening and your environment. So I just want to ensure that, especially anyone who is also listening to this podcast, but specifically in this conversation, Adam, is just to really acknowledge you for creating an environment and you know, being a role model that she shows up that way. Because, you know, there's not every 5-year-old is going to show up that way, but yet every 5-year-old has the opportunity to show up that way. So thank you for being who you are for her, that you're creating a human in the world that's like that. That's, you know, really remarkable.
Thank you. That really means a lot. And that's something that's really important to me. You know, like, I think it's important for our kids to learn all the things they need and be really good at reading or writing or numbers. And that's important. But for me, it's like, I love the fact that my daughter is very in touch with what's important, like the beauty of the world. She's very loving and very caring. And yeah, I am very proud of her for that, you know, that we've got that. But yeah, it is something that you've got to spend a lot of time on. So I do appreciate you saying that. It means a lot.
I love the fact that you even just used the word appreciation again.
Yeah, it's just coming out. It's the
semantic. Oh, no, right? Oh, there you go. There's my superpower for you. I started discovering that my purpose, that one of the things that shows up for me is very easily hearing people's purpose. You know, the why they're here. And as you know, given that you love Simon Sinek, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I'm struck by that your why, I assert it is something like that. Your purpose is to create a world where people are appreciated, and that there's a world of appreciation. And that's kind of just my guess and take. I could be completely wrong, but you're welcome to try.
No, you've been I'm incredibly impressed with your ability to get these things out of people that quite often, you know, at least for me, is not being coherent, and you've heard it. So again, this is, you know, you're walking the talk of what you say. You really hear people. So it's a superpower.
Thank you. So back to you to close on the evening. So firstly, thank you so much for so much, Adam. Really, you know, you're being willing to really open yourself up and just share everything. And I do know there's also more to the iceberg with your story that I just want to acknowledge and honor. You know, your courage to really open yourself and be really straight and transparent in the world is really a credit to you. And so thank you for doing that for everyone, including the podcast. I do want to make sure in the show notes, we are going to plug your podcast. Settling is not an option, which I do highly recommend for everybody, because none of us really want to live a life where we're settling. But so, Adam, back to a leader is someone who?
A leader is someone, I think, who leads from the front, and kind of what I was saying before, makes a safe path for others to follow. So, you know, a leader needs to understand it's not for everyone. As Simon Sinek says, you know, everyone can lead, but not everyone should be a leader. So understand it's a huge responsibility. It comes with great sacrifice. It comes with great risk. But what you will do is inspire people and not only shape them, in a professional capacity, because a leader doesn't always have to be somebody in a professional capacity. You'll shape somebody's whole being, in all domains of their life. So I guess if you're going to call yourself a leader, just understand it's a big deal. It's not just that title. It is far, far greater than that.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much again for joining us today, Adam.
Thank you. Thanks, Kylie. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.